Hey guys, good morning. And guys, thanks for having me out here. I want to talk a little bit about the recruiting process, and then I really just want to open it up for questions for you guys and your parents. I want to give you as much insight into the process as I possibly can. But in terms of, and I've got a perspective from a coach at the Division III level for 6 years, and I've coached the Division I level for 1, and I've played at both as well. Started my career at Hofstra and finished it down at Roanoke. So I've got an interesting perspective on both the Division I recruiting process and the Division III recruiting process. But to start, before we touch on the actual academic piece of it, I want to talk about just how to go about it from your perspective. The process is getting earlier and earlier every year, and the best thing you can do, you have to be proactive in this process in terms of both reaching out to coaches, but in terms of getting your materials organized as well. And what I mean materials is when you send a coach a profile, whether it's a video or an email, the best thing you can do is attach all your academic information, any test scores, any transcripts, any coach recommendations, any statistical stuff you can, just to give the big picture. We get hundreds of emails a day, but you've got to be persistent in the fact that, and you have to understand the certain rules in terms of coaches being able to respond to you. Whereas as many emails as we get and as many phone calls we get at the Division I level, until a certain date, you cannot reach back to a student athlete. So in this process, my first piece of advice is, outside of being extremely proactive and having all your materials, is just get it out to the coach, but get your materials there in bunch, all right? Make sure when you test, no matter what you do, you attach everything. We understand that you guys are young and you're coming up through the process, and we understand you'll have the opportunity to take test scores again, but it's great to get that initial baseline on student athletes. So to touch on the difference between the Division I schools and then specifically the Ivy League, in terms of the Ivy League, I'm sure you guys play with young guys that are already committed, and there are a handful of guys committed here, and that's awesome. And it is, the one thing I can emphasize about the Ivy League is that it is a bit of a slower process. I'm not necessarily more based off academics, but we need to give time to student athletes to test, make sure whether it's freshman, sophomore, junior transcripts, and make sure they're compiling their academic picture, and also staying on top of these guys. As much as you see kids committing early to Ivy League schools, it's more or less committing to a process where you have to complete your academic career all the way through your junior year in order to get a true insight and a true picture into whether or not you can commit to that school. So, and I'll answer questions in a bit, but the Ivy League process, if I can emphasize one thing, it's just a little bit slower than the normal process at the Division I level. There's more of a focus, obviously, on academics, but there's an academic index, or an AI, which involves class rank, GPA, test scores, and a lot of it is more or less a jigsaw puzzle. You've got to understand, there are 66 some odd Division I schools, and this position might almost be harder. I was a goalie coming up through it. This position might almost be harder than goaltending. You have 4 or 5 goalies on a team and maybe 2, 3, 4 face-off guys. So understand that, Princeton specifically, we're recruiting 8 or 9 guys a year. We're normally taking a face-off guy or a face-off guy every other year. So there just aren't that many spots. My one true piece of advice is find someone that can give you a realistic evaluation of where you think you're going to fall, a true evaluation of Division I, II, or Division III athlete. It'll help you in the process, because every kid early on is going to put Duke, UVA, North Carolina, Hopkins, and there are only a handful of face-off spots for those schools. So as you're coming up through the process, these guys do a great job here, but it's about really understanding where you think you can fall and then where you think you can progress to. So really today, I just kind of wanted to open up the floor, and I think we can learn best from asking questions. So parents, feel free, student, players, anything we can start with to kind of get this off the ground. But I'd love to help answer anything about the recruiting process, specifically the Ivy League or Division I or Division III recruiting. So if anyone, please.
Yeah, you're specifically a face-off guy. What are the 2 additional talents that you could have? Defense or being able to run down and score that would be attractive to you? You're a great face-off guy. What else could you add to your game?
So it's a great question. So outside of the actual skill of being a face-off guy, I mean, there are a ton of great face-off guys out there. So you're looking for as complete as a picture as possible. I mean, you would love to have them, I mean, understand you're not going to win every face-off. So you need to be able to obviously play defense, learn to, you know, whether it's defensive midfield or whoever. But, you know, in terms of me personally, I mean, we're looking for the most complete picture, whether what he can do with the ball after he wins the face-off. I mean, you see, it's all about ball possession and control and being able to make that play after you get the ball out of the X. So to answer your question, really just, you know, as close to the total package as possible. You know, it'd be great if you could recruit a face-off guy that can also play on the offensive side. It'd be great if you can recruit a face-off guy that is a proven defensive midfielder throughout his high school career. So I would say, I mean, you obviously never want to stop developing those skills, but that's a great question. So. You know, it's not about waiting. It's more or less, I mean, you still target your guys. I mean, the way the landscape of Division I recruiting has shifted, it is earlier. So I'm not going to say we're waiting until junior or senior year for these guys to develop, but it's more or less you're still recruiting them on pace with any other school. It's just an understanding, you know, when we talk to these student athletes, you have to understand that if you've set yourself up, and you guys are going to see it. You're going to earn every opportunity you put out there. So if you put your time in schoolwork and you put your time in athletically, you're going to earn whatever opportunities you get in terms of recruiting. But what you really need to understand is, you know, with the Ivy League picture, a lot of it is you may have an opportunity to commit to a school outside of the Ivy League a little earlier than you would the Ivies. So it is a matter of understanding that, you know, hey, specifically with Princeton, if Princeton's a place you would want to be, more often than not, it's talking with families about waiting throughout the process and just having to wait a little longer as the academic piece develops. I'm sorry, say that again?
The kid commits and then the head coach leaves before they actually graduate from high school. How does that change up the process?
So that's a great question. I don't have much experience with that, but I would say if I could answer that, you'd hope that the school, in terms of the athletic department, I mean, as much as you commit to a head coach, you hope that the families understand that they're committing to the school. And I'm sure it's kind of handled differently everywhere. You know, I'd imagine that some programs and athletic departments may honor the commitments, and some programs and athletic departments may say, hey, with the new coaching staff, you can kind of wipe the slate clean and bring in your own guys. So that might be a good point of reference to start at. It's really different within every school. I mean, you know, the National Letter of Intent Day, you know, in terms of them signing, but the commitments, you know, a lot of it is just verbal committing early, and then really seeing how, for us, it's seeing how the academic piece fits in. And then with only 9 spots, you kind of shift around. You know, it may be in our case where we commit a handful of guys and then we're looking for our face-off guy and he's going to have to be an extremely high academic guy, or so it is different in terms of when guys commit throughout the process. So the Ivy League does not give athletic scholarships, and that's also extremely important throughout the process in terms of finding where you fit, you and your family fit financially, what are your needs, and then really what the school can offer you. So no, the Ivy League does not give athletic scholarships. They're absolutely, it's a little different in terms of the non-traditional season restraints. So specifically at the Ivy League, you're allowed 12 fall practice dates, where other Division I schools, I think, could practice any amount of times. And then in terms of individual work, we're allowed 6 hours a week compared to the normal 8 hours a week. So there are constraints, and I mean, my experience in the Ivy League is only at Princeton. So in terms of our athletic director and his whole motto of education through athletics, as it should be, it really is a focus on being a student before the athlete. So it is a little different in terms of the Ivy League. it is a little less. I mean, I don't want to say the time commitment's less, but there are more constrictions on how much time you can spend with these guys. Please.
If you're fortunate enough to commit as a coach, what's your expectation of the kid when he's still in high school?
It's honestly, I mean, we stay on these guys. It's not a matter of just, hey, we're committing to this school, and then, you know, as a young guy, and you guys have to hear this, you earn the opportunities, but as much as you commit to a school, you've got to hold your end of the academic piece up. And specifically at the Ivy League, I mean, it's constant. We want these guys to retest, get their tests. I mean, you want to take these standardized tests as much and as early as you can, and then continue to take them and try to score the best. I think that specifically you hear from a lot of Division I coaches pushing the testing earlier and earlier, and a lot of it's just to get a baseline read on these guys, to know that, hey, this is a young guy, 9th grader or 10th grader taking his SATs. You know that hopefully, as you know, he then goes back, goes through the tutoring process, goes through the class process, that he will raise up. But our expectations are you absolutely have to keep up the academic piece, and you can absolutely lose a spot for not doing so. So, I mean, you still, Princeton specifically, you still have to get into the school in order to be a lacrosse player there. So. Numbers specifically, I mean, it all kind of falls within that academic index. It matters where you go to school, prep school, public school, what kind of course load you're taking. So I don't kind of want to hammer out numbers specifically to, just because I don't want to give anyone a certain pinpoint here or there. But, you know, Princeton, I would say 3, 6 or above, and then, you know, some high test scores, PSATs, SAT2s as well. So. Yeah, you know, it's a great question. It's really, you know, it's 66 Division I schools, 285 Division III schools. So, you know, obviously there's going to be discrepancy in terms of the highest level at each, but the biggest difference is not, you know, there are great athletes and great lacrosse players everywhere, and some guys mature later into great lacrosse players. So, I mean, you can look at the professional level right now. There are a handful of Division III guys playing on Team USA and playing great roles as MLL All-Stars and within the pros. So it's really how guys develop. It's more or less the biggest thing between Division I and Division III is the time commitment in the non-traditional season. In season, whether you're at Stevens Tech, a former Division III school, or RIT, where Coach Raganese is from, or Princeton, Denver, Duke, in season, it's the same exact time commitment. At a season at the Division III level, in the non-traditional season, you're limited to 16 practices, which is normally a 4-week span, so, and 120 minutes of competition, and no individuals. So basically, in that 4 weeks, gives you a snapshot of what it's like to be a college lacrosse player in the spring, and then you kind of have your freedom to kind of join, whether a club organization or a fraternity. It's just a little different. So, whereas at the Division I level, it's just a little more time commitment across the board. Go ahead.
You make it into the school already academically, but you don't get recruited. What goes into trying to walk onto the team?
So that's a great question. So the question was, if you get into the school but you weren't recruited, what's the process of getting on the team? I mean, we deal with it almost, you know, with a handful of guys every year, and it's just about communicating through the process where if a coach at time, you know, he might have been recruiting you, or he might have been on his radar, but then the spot kind of filled and you were said, hey, this is the place for me, no matter what, lacrosse or not. And that's the biggest thing in choosing a school. I mean, you have to go with the old tale of, you know, God forbid you can't play or you injure yourself, or you still love the school. But with that, you just communicate with the coach and just hope you know, you're allowed the opportunity to try out and walk on. And it's different everywhere. That could be a one-day tryout, that could be a fall tryout, that could be in the spring preseason tryout. So it's different everywhere, but it's just a matter of communicating with the coach and letting him know that, hey, I chose this school because it's a great place and it's where I want to be, and I'd love the opportunity to play lacrosse, and kind of couple that with my academic career. Well, guys, I'll kind of float around for the next couple hours as you guys get going. Parents, if you have any questions, feel free to come up and chat and fire away. I'd love to help you. I hope it was informative. Again, just be proactive, work on your academics. There are a ton of great lacrosse players out here. I mean, you can see the competition here, you know, on this day and, you know, in this part of the country. But what it's about is taking care of the academic piece, being a good high character guy, going about it the right way, and then study, 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 because as many of the good lacrosse players, there are a ton of great players, ton of great students. So earn the opportunities you get. All good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.